Good Saturday morning, everybody. Hope you've had a great week. And glad you could be here this morning as we get going pretty good here in the book of James. Book of James is kind of the equivalent. We've been in the book of Proverbs, and James is in many ways the equivalent. It is I think you would say, the New Testament book of wisdom. Proverbs is the Old Testament book of wisdom, and James is a book of New Testament wisdom. And so we will be starting this morning in the second verse of the first chapter. And we're going to go ahead and James is going to go ahead and get the mean and nasty out of the way, dealing with one of the most difficult topics, as he's going to talk about our attitude towards trials, tests, temptations, and they come in all forms and fashions. Financial problems, family problems, job problems, sickness, death, and then just straight up temptation, as we are tempted to sin. And so James is going to deal with this and how we overcome that in these next few verses. He begins with these words, which are somewhat difficult for most of us to swallow, when he says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations." Most of us do not consider temptation, testing, trials to be a time of joy. But let's see if we can take that apart and maybe understand what James is trying to say to us. The word that he uses here for temptation is the word, he uses the same word throughout the entire book, and it is the Greek word that means to tempt, to try, to test, to prove, and so there are other words that are translated temptations in other places in the Bible, but again, this one specifically is to test, to try, to prove. Is the key of the definition here. And so what we understand from that then is that these temptations are temptations, tests to prove us. They are for a beneficial reason. Vines, in his commentary, says that they are permitted by God for a good purpose. And what is that purpose? That purpose is to make us stronger, to develop our faith, to make us pure, and to help us grow. And as we overcome temptation, we become more like Christ. We are stronger, better prepared to face future tests, and we also, when we are able to overcome testing, we are a testimony. It is a witness to others who see how we deal with those things. Now, one other thing this verse says, count it all joy when you fall, not if you fall. And so he makes it very clear that this testing will come into our life. It is the kind of, it is unavoidable. The other thing that he says is when you fall into it. The great scholar, Greek scholar, A.T. Robertson says this means when you fall into it, you're surrounded by it. And so it is the idea of many tests and temptation. And so it's just a reality that James wants us to understand. And he says, so how do we face those? He says we face them with joy. He says that is the attitude we have to be able to face and to deal with these tests and temptations. Which seems to be an oxymoron. How do we have joy when we are faced with these kinds of tests? Because he says in verse 3, we know that the trying of our faith works patience, but let patience have a perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. What he says is we can have that joy, we have that attitude towards testing, because we know that testing, that trial, works patience in us. It teaches us. It matures us. Patience here means to persevere. It teaches us to endure. And so each test, trial, temptation we come through helps prepare us and strengthen us for future trials and temptations, testing that comes our way. And he says, we know then, one of the things that we know about it then is, he says, it can be a good experience. It can be a positive experience. Let it have its perfect work. And the word perfect does not mean perfect as we typically use it in modern English. It is a word, a better way of saying it is make us mature, make us grown. It gets us, it matures us. And perhaps you've seen a child, a young person, maybe they were 12, maybe they were 12, but many times they acted like they were about 7. They didn't act their age. That's the phrase we use. And that's what he's saying about testing. Testing helps us to live out our potential, live up to our calling, makes us mature, accomplishes God's purpose in our life, and allows us then, and probably many of you listening this morning can look back on tests and trials in your life and see how when you came through those, that God used those to develop you, and that you are a better person today because of that testing. You are closer to God, that your walk with Him is stronger than it was before the trial. And so this morning, these verses serve to remind us that, again, we face testing and trials many times with many attitudes, but James reminds us to face them with joy. Because God is allowing those things to come into our life to develop us. And so challenge you today. What is it that God's letting you go through? What are you going through today? Look for the good. How is God working His perfect will, developing patience and maturity in your life? Think about that. Have a great day. We'll see you back here Monday morning.